My phone vibrated at 11:47 p.m. I almost ignored it. Claire's still at the office. Again, the dinner I had made 3 hours earlier sat untouched on the kitchen table. The pasta had gone cold. The candles had burned themselves out. Another normal night. At least that was what I thought. I picked up my phone and glanced at the notification. Withdrawal alert. The amount made my stomach drop. I blinked. Then I looked again. The number didn't change. For a second, I wondered if the bank app was broken. My thumb moved across the screen. The account loaded. Balance, $0. The room suddenly felt too quiet. I stared at the screen, then refreshed it. Again and again. Still zero. Every dollar. Gone. The savings account Claire and I had spent years building together was empty. I sat down slowly. My heart wasn't racing. It was worse. It felt like it had stopped. No. The word came out under my breath. I opened the transaction history. One transfer. One massive transfer. Made less than an hour ago. Authorized by Claire Morgan. I kept staring at her name, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into someone else's. They didn't. The transfer destination caught my attention next. A corporate account. Not our joint account. Not an investment account. A company account. I already knew which company. Claire's. My jaw tightened. For 7 years, I had supported her career. 7 years. While she climbed higher and higher, I handled everything behind the scenes. Taxes, investments, bills, savings, emergency funds, retirement planning, every late-night budget session, every sacrifice, every decision designed to give us security. I never complained. Not once. Because I believed we were building something together. I picked up my phone and opened our messages. The last text I sent her sat there unanswered. 3 days old. Dinner tomorrow? Just us. No work. No reply. Above, it were several more messages. Small things. Questions. Updates. Reminders. All ignored. The unread marks felt different tonight. Not disappointing. Humiliating. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. A third time. Nothing. The phone felt heavier in my hand. I opened her company's internal portal. Years ago, Claire had given me limited access because I occasionally helped review financial reports. Most husbands probably didn't spend their nights reading balance sheets. I did, because somebody had to make sure the numbers made sense. After several minutes of searching, I found it. A confidential announcement scheduled for senior staff. Emergency acquisition completed. Funding secured. Lead negotiator. Ethan Brooks. My eyes narrowed. Ethan, of course. Claire's favorite executive. The man she trusted with everything. The man whose opinion somehow mattered more than mine these days. I leaned back in my chair. The pieces started fitting together. She had emptied our savings to save a business deal. A deal connected to Ethan. And she hadn't told me. Not before. Not after. Not at all. The front door opened shortly after 1 a.m. Claire walked in carrying her laptop bag. Her heels clicked across the floor. She stopped when she noticed the light. Oh, you're still awake. I looked at her. She looked exhausted, but not guilty, not worried, not even concerned, just tired, like any other night. Big day, I asked. She dropped her bag near the couch. You have no idea. Then her phone lit up. She immediately checked it. A smile appeared. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. Ethan, the question slipped out before I could stop it. Claire glanced up. Yeah. Her attention returned to the screen. He wanted confirmation that tomorrow's announcement is ready. Tomorrow's announcement. The deal. The deal funded with our future. I waited. Waited for her to mention the transfer. Waited for her to tell me. Waited for some sign that I still mattered enough to be included. Nothing came. She walked past me toward the stairs. I'm exhausted. Claire. She paused. One hand rested on the railing. What? I almost told her. Almost demanded an explanation. Almost asked why our account was empty. Instead, I heard myself say something else. Dinner's on the table. Her eyes shifted briefly toward the kitchen, then back to the stairs. I already ate. A few seconds later, she disappeared upstairs. The cold pasta remained exactly where it was. I sat there long after she was gone, looking at 2 untouched plates. One for her, one for me. Neither of us hungry anymore. The next morning, I attended her company's celebration event. Normally, I avoided these things. Corporate parties always felt strange. People congratulating each other for surviving disasters they created themselves. But today was different. I needed answers. The ballroom buzzed with energy. Investors, executives, board members, everyone smiling, everyone celebrating. A giant screen displayed headlines about the acquisition. Claire stood near the stage. Confident, sharp, untouchable. The woman I fell in love with. The woman I barely recognize now. Applause erupted as she stepped to the microphone. Yesterday was one of the most important days in company history. More applause. Claire smiled. This deal would not have happened without extraordinary leadership. Her gaze moved toward Ethan. He stood proudly near the front row. Ethan Brooks deserves special recognition. The room exploded with cheers. Ethan nodded modestly. Claire continued. He worked tirelessly to make this acquisition possible. More applause. More smiles. More praise. I stood near the back of the room. Invisible. Watching. Listening. Waiting. Claire thanked executives. Lawyers. Consultants. Department heads. Almost everyone. Then she finally glanced toward me. For one brief moment. My husband Daniel has always been supportive. That was it. One sentence. 7 years reduced to one sentence. The applause was polite. Forgettable. Then she turned back toward Ethan. The celebration continued. Something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something quieter. The realization that I wasn't standing beside her anymore. I was standing behind her. And maybe I'd been for years. After the event ended, people crowded around Claire and Ethan. Investors shook hands. Photographers took pictures. Champagne glasses clinked together. I slipped away unnoticed. Nobody stopped me. Nobody noticed I left. Back home, I sat in my office. The house felt larger than usual. Emptier. I opened my laptop. If Claire wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. Hours passed. Documents. Financial reports. Acquisition filings. Internal projections. The deeper I looked, the worse things felt. Something wasn't right. The numbers didn't fit. Certain liabilities seemed strangely hidden. Important details appeared buried beneath layers of paperwork. Almost like someone didn't want investors asking questions. My pulse quickened. I opened another report. Then another. A final document caught my attention. A disclosure page. Small. Easy to miss. Dangerous. I read it twice. Then a third time. The color drained from my face. The acquisition Claire had risked everything for wasn't nearly as secure as she believed. There was a secret buried inside the deal. A very expensive secret. And if I was reading the numbers correctly, Claire had just bet our entire future on a ticking time bomb. I stared at the screen long into the night, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. The document stayed open on my screen until sunrise. Every time I thought I had misunderstood something, another page proved I hadn't. The acquisition was rotten, not on the surface. The public numbers looked clean. That was the problem. They looked too clean. A company carrying that much debt should never have looked that healthy. Someone had buried the damage where most people would never think to look. And Claire had just poured our future into it. I rubbed my eyes and opened another report. Then another. Coffee grew cold beside my keyboard. Hours disappeared. By noon, I had highlighted enough red flags to fill an entire presentation. Unreported legal exposure. Inflated projected revenue. Hidden operating losses. Deferred obligations disguised as future opportunities. The language was clever. Dangerous enough to destroy a company. Subtle enough to fool people who only skimmed reports. Claire normally never missed things like this. That bothered me more than anything, because it meant one of two things. Either she hadn't looked closely enough, or she trusted somebody else's judgment completely. And I already knew who that somebody was. Ethan Brooks. My phone buzzed. Marcus, my oldest friend. You're alive. Barely. His laugh faded quickly. You sound awful. Didn't sleep. Claire again. I stared at the screen. Claire. Ethan. Millions of dollars. Pick one. A pause. How bad? Worse than bad. The silence on his end stretched. Then came a slow exhale. Daniel. Tell me you aren't cleaning up another one of her messes." I didn't answer. That was answer enough. Marcus groaned. "There it is." "What?" "That thing you always do." I leaned back. "What thing?" "You convince yourself you're helping while everyone else watches you carry weight that isn't yours." The words landed harder than I expected, because part of me knew he was right. For years, every crisis eventually reached my desk. Claire made decisions. I solved problems. Nobody noticed because I never asked for credit. I loved her. That was enough. Or at least it used to be. I'm just checking numbers. Marcus laughed without humor. "Daniel, normal people don't spend 12 hours checking numbers after their wife empties their savings account." The sentence hung there. Raw. Ugly. True. After ending the call, I returned to work. Not because Marcus was wrong, because I needed answers. By late afternoon, I found something that made my stomach twist. A compensation agreement. Private. Confidential. Buried deep inside acquisition records. My eyes narrowed, then widened. Ethan had received a massive bonus for completing the acquisition. Not afterward. Not based on performance. The moment the deal closed. No matter what happened next. I reread the page. Then again. A bonus large enough to change someone's life. A bonus directly tied to rushing approval. No way. The words escaped before I realized it. Everything suddenly made sense. The urgency, the pressure, the shortcuts, the ignored warnings. Ethan hadn't simply believed in the deal. He had profited from it. Personally, my fingers curled around the edge of the desk. Claire trusted him completely, and he knew it. That evening, I drove to her office. The building glowed against the dark sky. Most employees had already left. Claire's floor remained lit. Of course it did. Work always came first. The receptionist recognized me and waved me through. Minutes later, I stepped into Claire's office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights, awards, success, everything she had fought for. She barely glanced up. "Give me 5 minutes." I stood there quietly. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. Emails, messages, calls, anything except me. Eventually, she closed her laptop. "What is it?" I placed a folder on her desk. Claire frowned. "What's this?" "Problems." A small smile appeared. The kind she used when she thought somebody was overreacting. "Daniel, read it." She opened the folder. The smile disappeared. Page after page turned. Highlighted sections. Marked liabilities. Projected losses. Questionable disclosures. The room became very still. When she finally looked up, something had changed. Not concern. Annoyance. "How long have you been doing this?" "Doing what?" "This investigation." I blinked. "Investigation?" Her jaw tightened. "You spent days digging through company records. Because our savings are inside this deal. Our savings are an investment. Our savings are almost gone." The words came out sharper than I intended. Claire crossed her arms. "The acquisition is solid." "It isn't." "It is." I pointed toward the folder. "Those liabilities are hidden." "They aren't hidden. They're buried under layers of disclosures. They're standard disclosures." I stared at her. "You actually believe that?" Her expression hardened. The distance between us suddenly felt enormous. Then came the sentence I never expected. "You're jealous." I laughed once. A short, stunned sound. "Jealous?" "Of Ethan." The room seemed to tilt. Claire stood and walked toward the window. "He earned this deal." My voice dropped. "This isn't about Ethan. Everything has been about Ethan since the acquisition. Because he's connected to the acquisition." "No." She turned toward me. "This started the moment I trusted him instead of you." The words hit harder than anger ever could, because they revealed what she truly believed. That my concern came from insecurity. Not evidence. Not experience. Not love. Just jealousy. I looked at the woman standing across from me, and suddenly felt tired. Very tired. Not physically. Emotionally. 7 years. 7 years of support. 7 years of loyalty. Reduced to jealousy. I understand. Claire frowned. "What does that mean?" I gathered the folder. "It means I'm done arguing." "Daniel." "No." The word surprised both of us. I almost never interrupted her. "Not anymore. I brought you facts. You brought opinions." I nodded slowly. "Then trust your opinions." Her eyes narrowed. "What is that supposed to mean?" I headed toward the door. The answer came easily. It means the next problem is yours. That night, I sat alone at the dining table. The chair across from me remained empty. Again, a plate waited for someone who wasn't coming. Again, normally I would have texted her, called her, reminded her to eat, asked when she'd be home. Instead, I ate in silence, then cleared both plates, the second one untouched. After washing the dishes, I picked up my phone. Claire's contact sat at the top of my favorites list. 7 years. One tap away. Morning messages. Good night texts. Emergency calls. Everything. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then pressed. Delete favorite. The shortcut vanished. A tiny action. It felt much bigger. The next few days were strange. Claire kept working. Ethan kept celebrating. The company kept praising the acquisition. And I stopped helping. No financial advice. No private reviews. No warnings. No quiet fixes. Whenever Claire called, I answered politely. Nothing more. Whenever she complained about stress, I listened. Then changed the subject. The pattern confused her. Good. For years, I had carried responsibilities nobody acknowledged. Now, they belonged to the people who created them, not me. 3 days later, investor concerns started appearing publicly. Small questions, minor concerns, nothing dramatic. Yet, but I recognized the signs. People were digging. People were noticing. People were finding the same problems I'd found. My phone rang during breakfast. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Daniel Morgan? Speaking. A woman's voice. Professional. Careful. This is Sophia Reed. I knew the name immediately. Major investor. Board influence. Smart enough to scare executives. What can I do for you? A brief pause followed, as if she was choosing her words carefully. Then she delivered a question that changed everything. Did Claire know the numbers were manipulated? My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. The room suddenly felt colder. And just like that, the real storm arrived. Did Claire know the numbers were manipulated? Sophia Reed's question stayed in my head long after the call ended. I stood in the kitchen staring at the dark screen of my phone. Part of me wanted to defend Claire immediately. Another part wasn't sure anymore. The worst thing about losing trust wasn't anger. It was uncertainty. I no longer knew how much she knew, or how much she had ignored. Over the next week, investor concerns spread faster than anyone expected. Questions became meetings. Meetings became investigations. Investigations became panic. News articles started appearing. Financial blogs picked up the story. Industry analysts began discussing the acquisition publicly. The perfect deal was suddenly under a microscope, and every time someone looked closer, they found another problem. I watched from a distance, not because I enjoyed it, because I was tired of standing in front of disasters trying to stop them alone. For years, I had patched cracks before anyone noticed them. Now those cracks were becoming visible. Claire called 3 times one afternoon. I answered on the 4th. Her voice sounded rushed. Tight. Have you seen what's happening online? Yes. This is ridiculous. I stayed quiet. She continued pacing on the other end. I could hear footsteps, papers moving, a door opening and closing. They don't understand the deal. Maybe. A long pause followed. That single word clearly irritated her. Maybe they see something worth questioning. Another pause. This one heavier. Then came a sharp breath. You're doing it again. Doing what? Taking their side. I closed my eyes. I don't have a side, Claire. The line went dead a second later. The company held emergency meetings almost every day. Investors demanded answers. Board members demanded updates. Employees whispered in hallways. Confidence was disappearing. Meanwhile, Ethan remained calm. Almost too calm. Every report Claire received carried the same message. Everything is under control. Every presentation. Every conference call. Every interview. The same words. Everything is under control. The phrase started sounding less like reassurance and more like a prayer. One evening, Marcus dropped by my house. He stood in the kitchen watching me cook. You look different. I glanced over my shoulder. Good different or bad different? Different. A grin appeared briefly, then vanished. His expression softened. You're not chasing her problems anymore. The vegetables sizzled in the pan. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I nodded. No. How does that feel? I thought about it. The answer surprised me. Lonely. Marcus looked confused. I understood why. Most people thought freedom felt exciting. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it felt like standing in an empty room after carrying a heavy box for years. The weight was gone, but so was the purpose. I still love her. The words came quietly. Marcus leaned against the counter. I know. I keep waiting for her to notice. His eyes dropped toward the floor. Maybe she already has. A few days later, Claire came home before midnight. That alone felt unusual. She walked through the front door, carrying a stack of folders. Her makeup was fading. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes. She looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally. Without a word, she dropped the folders onto the dining table. Papers spilled everywhere. I glanced down. Financial reports, legal reviews, compliance documents. The panic was finally reaching her. Claire rubbed her forehead. Then she noticed me reading one page. Her expression hardened, not with anger, with pride, the kind that refused help even while drowning. I can handle it. I nodded. I know. That answer seemed to bother her more than an argument would have. 3 days later, everything changed. I was working in my office when my phone vibrated. A message from Olivia Bennett, the company's compliance officer, someone who rarely contacted me directly. Need to speak with you. Urgent. Minutes later, we sat in a quiet coffee shop. Olivia placed a folder on the table. I shouldn't even be showing this. My stomach tightened. What is it? Ethan. The single word told me enough. She opened the folder. Emails. Internal memos. Meeting notes. My pulse quickened. Then I saw the dates. Weeks before the acquisition. Weeks before Claire approved it. Weeks before our savings disappeared. Ethan had received warnings. Repeated warnings. Analysts flagged hidden liabilities. Auditors raised concerns. Several executives recommended delaying the deal. Every warning had been ignored, or buried, or redirected. Olivia pointed toward one particular email. This one matters. I read it, then read it again. The message clearly outlined a risk large enough to threaten the entire acquisition. Ethan had acknowledged receiving it, then never passed it forward. My jaw tightened. He hid this. Olivia nodded. He hid several. A cold feeling settled over me. Not because Ethan betrayed Claire, because Claire trusted him enough to stop listening to everyone else, including me. That evening, Claire arrived home carrying the same folder. I knew immediately. She had found out. The front door closed. She remained standing there, motionless, almost as if entering the house required effort. I waited. Several seconds passed. Then she walked toward the living room, slowly, like someone carrying invisible weight. Ethan lied. The words sounded strange coming from her. Broken, disbelieving. I set my book aside. She dropped onto the couch. He knew. My stomach twisted. Claire stared at nothing. He knew about the liabilities. No anger. No shouting. Only shock. The kind that arrives when trust suddenly dies. I remembered every argument, every warning, every dismissal. None of them mattered now. Reality had arrived on its own. Claire laughed once. A small, painful sound. I defended him. Neither of us moved. The room felt larger than usual. The distance between us impossible to ignore. Eventually she looked toward me. Not for advice. Not for solutions. Maybe just for comfort. I didn't know how to give it anymore. The weeks that followed changed everything. We still lived in the same house, but it barely felt that way. Breakfast happened separately. Dinner happened separately. Entire days passed without meaningful conversation. A long hallway connected our rooms. Every night it felt longer. One evening, I found myself standing in front of our wedding photo. The picture captured a version of us that no longer existed. Claire smiling. Me smiling. Both of us believing love could survive anything. I turned the frame face down, then walked away. The decision came quietly. No dramatic moment. No final argument. Just clarity. I opened the closet, pulled out a suitcase, started packing. Shirts, jeans, documents, a few personal items. The movements felt calm, steady, almost peaceful. Halfway through, I heard footsteps behind me. Claire stood in the doorway, frozen. Her eyes moved from the suitcase to my hands, then back again. Neither of us spoke. The air felt heavy. A shirt slipped from my fingers. Claire swallowed hard. You're leaving. Not a question. A realization. I zipped one side of the suitcase. Her hands trembled slightly. The sight caught me off guard. This wasn't the confident CEO. This wasn't the woman commanding boardrooms. This was someone frightened. Someone watching consequences become real. The suitcase rested beside the bedroom door. Waiting, just like I had waited. For years. Claire took a step forward. Then another. The words seemed difficult for her to form. More difficult than any business presentation. More difficult than any negotiation. Her voice nearly broke. Daniel. I lifted my eyes toward her. The fear in them stopped me cold. Not fear of losing money. Not fear of losing a company. Something much deeper. Her lips parted. The question finally escaped. Have I already lost you? Have I already lost you? The question followed me long after that night ended. Claire stood beside the suitcase. Waiting. Hoping. Afraid. And for the first time in years, I didn't know what answer she wanted. Maybe she didn't know either. I never gave her one. I picked up the suitcase, walked past her, and spent the night in the guest room. The door closed quietly behind me. No shouting. No dramatic fight. Just distance. The kind that grows slowly until one day it becomes impossible to cross. The next morning, headlines exploded across every financial website. Major investors were pulling back. Several funds announced they were freezing future commitments until the acquisition could be reviewed. Market confidence dropped almost immediately. News anchors discussed the company for all the wrong reasons. Questions became accusations. Accusations became investigations. The crisis was no longer private. The whole world was watching. Claire barely came home that week. When she did, she looked older. Not in years. In exhaustion. Every conversation seemed to drain another piece of her. Every new report carried worse news. The company she spent years building was beginning to shake beneath her feet. And Ethan still kept insisting everything could be fixed. Everything was manageable. Everything would recover. I wondered if he even believed himself anymore. One evening, Claire walked into the house carrying a thick stack of legal documents. The folders landed heavily on the dining table. She stared at them for several seconds, then sat down. Neither of us touched dinner. The food cooled between us. A familiar sight. Except now it wasn't because she chose work. It was because she looked too exhausted to eat. Her fingers slid across one document. Investigation authorization. Internal review approval. Independent audit request. Signed. Every page signed. Claire noticed me reading. The board demanded it. I nodded. They were right. The answer seemed to surprise her. Not because it was harsh. Because it wasn't. For once, I wasn't fighting her. I wasn't trying to convince her. I was simply telling the truth. The investigation moved quickly. Too quickly for Ethan to stay ahead of it. Evidence appeared everywhere. Emails, internal communications, financial adjustments, hidden reports, ignored warnings. Every day revealed something worse than the day before. Then came the final blow. Ethan had manipulated key projections before the acquisition reached approval. Not small adjustments. Not harmless estimates. Major numbers. Numbers large enough to influence decisions. Large enough to secure funding. Large enough to earn his bonus. The same bonus I had discovered weeks earlier. The company immediately suspended him. News spread through the industry within hours. His reputation collapsed almost overnight. Business magazines called it deception. Investors called it fraud. Former supporters disappeared. Nobody wanted to stand near him anymore. Watching it happen should have felt satisfying. Instead, I kept thinking about Claire. Because every revelation carried a second truth. She had trusted Ethan more than me. And now that trust was destroying everything. A week later, Claire came home before sunset. That hadn't happened in months. She stood in the bedroom doorway while I folded clothes. Neither of us spoke immediately. The silence wasn't hostile. It was careful, like two people standing near broken glass. Finally, she stepped inside. I was wrong. The words came quietly. No excuses attached. No explanations. Just 4 words. I kept folding shirts. Not because I wanted to ignore her. Because I didn't know what to do with those words anymore. Claire sat on the edge of the bed. Her shoulders slumped. The confidence that once filled every room seemed gone. He lied to me. I nodded. I know. I should have listened. Another nod. The room grew still again. Then she looked toward me. Not as a CEO, not as someone defending herself, just as my wife. I thought I knew what I was doing. A bitter laugh escaped me. So did I. Her eyes lowered. The truth hurt both of us. Over the following days, she tried. That was the strange part. She genuinely tried. Coffee waited for me in the morning. Messages arrived during lunch. Simple questions. Small conversations. Attempts. Years earlier, those gestures would have meant everything. Now, they felt like flowers placed on a grave. Beautiful. Meaningful. Too late. One evening, I arrive home to find dinner already prepared. Claire stood in the kitchen. Nervous. Actually nervous. The sight felt almost unreal. I remembered your favorite. My gaze shifted toward the table, then toward her. For a moment, neither of us knew what to do. I sat down. So, did she? The meal lasted nearly 30 minutes. Longer than most conversations we'd shared recently. Yet something remained missing. Trust. Not anger. Not resentment. Trust. Without it, every effort felt fragile. Like trying to rebuild a house while the foundation remained cracked. A few nights later, she entered the living room carrying a small object. Her wedding ring. The gold band rested in her palm. She stared at it for several seconds before placing it on the coffee table. The sound was soft, yet it echoed through the room. Claire sat across from me. Her eyes looked tired. Red. Not from tears. From too many sleepless nights. I don't know how to fix this. The honesty caught me off guard. Because Claire always had answers. Always had plans. Always had control. Now she had none. I leaned back slowly. The words I had buried for years finally rose to the surface. You want to know what happened? She nodded. So I told her. Everything. Not the financial reports. Not Ethan. Not the company. Us. The hardest part wasn't the money. Claire remained still. It wasn't even being ignored. My voice softened. It was standing beside you every day and feeling invisible. Her expression changed immediately. Pain. Real pain. The kind no business crisis could create. I continued. You celebrated strangers while forgetting the person waiting at home. Her eyes closed briefly. You trusted everyone except me. The wedding ring sat between us. Neither of us touched it. I kept telling myself things would get better. The words grew heavier. Every promotion, every success, every milestone. Claire lowered her head. I thought eventually you'd turn around and notice I was still there. The room remained quiet. Not empty. Heavy. The truth had finally arrived, and there was nowhere left to hide from it. Days later, the company scheduled a major board meeting. Investors attended. Executives attended. Lawyers attended. Media representatives waited outside. Everyone wanted answers. Claire stood at the center of it all. I wasn't supposed to be there. Yet somehow I found myself sitting near the back. Watching. Listening. The room felt tense enough to snap. Claire approached the podium. No confidence. No performance. Just honesty. The investigation results appeared on the large screen behind her. Page after page. Evidence. Timelines. Findings. Facts. The truth finally stood where nobody could ignore it. Then Claire reached the final section. The room grew completely still. She took a breath, looked across the crowd, and revealed something nobody expected. Not Ethan's fraud. Not the manipulated reports. Everyone already knew those parts. Instead, she revealed who discovered the warning signs first, who identified the hidden liabilities, who tried to stop the disaster before it began. Her gaze moved toward the back of the room, toward me, and suddenly every head turned in my direction. The room froze, because everyone had just learned a truth Claire could no longer hide. The person she ignored had been right all along. The room remained quiet after Claire revealed the truth. Dozens of executives stared at me. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. Investors shifted in their seats. Nobody seemed sure what to do with the information. For weeks, they had searched for answers. Now they knew. The warnings had existed. The evidence had existed. The disaster could have been avoided. Claire stood alone at the podium, no longer hiding behind reports, no longer protecting Ethan, no longer protecting herself. Her voice remained steady. My husband identified the risks before the acquisition was approved. Every word seemed heavier than the one before it. I chose not to listen. The room stayed still. Nobody interrupted. Nobody challenged her. Because there was nothing left to challenge. The truth had finally won. The following months brought consequences. Real ones. Not press releases. Not public statements. Consequences. The board restructured leadership. Additional oversight was introduced. Independent reviews became mandatory. Investors slowly regained confidence. The company survived. Barely. Ethan didn't. Legal investigations followed. Industry organizations cut ties with him. His career collapsed under the weight of his own choices. The same shortcuts that once made him successful eventually destroyed him. Karma rarely arrived dramatically. Sometimes it arrived as a slow collapse nobody could stop. Claire kept her position, but something fundamental had changed. The powerful CEO who once controlled every room now moved through life differently. More careful, more thoughtful, more alone. For years, I had waited for messages that never came. Waited through missed dinners, missed anniversaries, missed conversations. Now she experienced something similar. Calls went unanswered. Friends became distant. Professional relationships turned cautious. People still respected her. Few truly trusted her. And trust was harder to rebuild than a company. Meanwhile, my own life began moving forward. Slowly at first, then faster than I expected. I rented a small office downtown. Nothing fancy, just enough space for a desk, a computer, and a future. The first morning felt strange. The room smelled like fresh paint. Sunlight spilled across empty walls. Nobody expected anything from me there. Nobody needed me to solve their problems. The office belonged to me. So did the decisions. So did the risks. For the first time in years, I wasn't living inside someone else's dream. I was building my own. Marcus stopped by during my second week. He looked around the office, then laughed. Not bad. High praise. I'm serious. He dropped into a chair. You seem different. That observation again. The same one he made months earlier. This time the answer came easier. I think I finally remembered who I am. Marcus smiled. There he is. I smiled back. Not because everything was perfect, because I no longer needed perfection to feel whole. Clients arrived gradually. One referral became two. Two became five. Five became 10. My experience managing investments suddenly mattered. People listened. People trusted me. People respected my judgment. The strange part wasn't the success. It was realizing I had always been capable of it. I had simply spent years standing in the background. Claire reached out several times during those months. Some messages were practical. Others weren't. A simple check-in, a congratulations, a question about my business. I answered politely. Nothing more. The deleted shortcut remained deleted. Her name no longer sat at the top of my phone. The absence felt meaningful, not cruel, just necessary. Certain doors could only stay closed if you stopped reaching for the handle. One rainy evening, she appeared outside my office. No warning, no dramatic entrance. Just Claire standing beneath an umbrella. The same woman I had loved for years. The same woman who had broken my heart without realizing it. I invited her inside. We talked for nearly an hour. About work. About life. About everything except us. Eventually, the conversation reached the place both of us knew it would. Claire glanced around the office. You built all this. There was pride in her voice. And sadness. I nodded. Still building. A small smile appeared. You always were good at that. The compliment lingered between us. Months earlier, it would have meant everything. Now it simply felt honest. Nothing more. Nothing less. When she left, she paused near the door. Thank you for helping save the company. I studied her expression. I wasn't trying to save the company. Her eyes softened. I know. Then she walked away. The rain swallowed her silhouette moments later. Several weeks passed before I saw her again. This time she called ahead. Her voice sounded calm, almost peaceful. Can we meet one last time? The request surprised me. Still, I agreed. The meeting took place outside her office building. The same building that had taken so much from us. The same building where I once waited for hours, hoping she would come home early. Claire arrived, carrying a small cardboard box. Nothing fancy, just a simple box. She handed it to me carefully. I opened it. My breath caught. Memories. Photographs. Old notes. Ticket stubs. Tiny pieces of a life we once shared. Near the top sat a folded piece of paper. I recognized it immediately. The first message I ever gave her. Back when we were young. Back when everything felt possible. Beneath it rested a photo from our happiest year together. We looked ridiculous. Happy. Carefree. Certain that love alone could solve every problem. I stared at the picture longer than I intended. Claire watched quietly. Neither of us rushed the moment. Finally, she spoke. I used to think you'd always be there. The honesty in her voice hurt more than tears would have, because it explained everything. Not cruelty, not malice. Assumption. She believed my love was permanent. Guaranteed. Something that would survive no matter how little attention it received. I closed the box gently. Claire looked toward the street. Cars passed. People hurried home. Life continued around us. Then her gaze returned to me. My greatest mistake wasn't trusting Ethan. A long pause followed. It was taking you for granted. The words settled between us. Heavy. Final. True. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us searched for magical solutions. There weren't any. Some lessons arrived too late. Some losses couldn't be reversed. That didn't make them less real. I loved you, Claire. Her eyes glistened. The words weren't meant to reopen old wounds. They were simply true. Part of me always would. Love doesn't disappear on command. It changes. It softens. It becomes memory. But it doesn't vanish. I know. The answer came barely above a whisper. I nodded slowly. And now I need something different. She understood immediately. Not another explanation. Not another apology. Understanding. Real understanding. The kind that comes only after consequences. A bittersweet smile touched her lips. Then she stepped back, giving me space. Maybe for the first time in years. Goodbye, Daniel. I held the box against my chest. Goodbye, Claire. Neither of us looked back. There was no reason to. The story had already ended. The next morning, I arrived at my office before sunrise. The city remained quiet. The streets below were nearly empty. I set the box of memories on a shelf. Not hidden, not displayed, just placed where it belonged. Part of my past, not my future. The sky slowly brightened beyond the window. Orange and gold spread across the horizon. A new day, a new chapter. My phone rested beside the computer. No messages, no missed calls, no notifications. Months ago, that silence would have felt lonely. Now it felt different, peaceful, earned. I stood by the window and watched the sunrise climb higher. The man who once waited for love to notice him was gone. In his place stood someone who finally understood his own worth. The city woke beneath the morning light. My future waited ahead. And as the sun rose over everything I had survived, my phone remained silent. This time, the silence felt like freedom